I need to tell you something. When I first started looking into how many retirees actually have $500,000 or more saved up, I got it completely wrong. Not slightly wrong, completely wrong. I spent years assuming one thing while the reality was something else entirely. And the strange part? Almost everyone makes the same mistake I did. Hit subscribe if you want the stuff nobody tells you, because I have a lot more where this came from. Everyone tells you to focus on hitting some magic savings number before you can rest easy. But here's what they've gotten backwards. It's not about whether you crossed some finish line that a magazine drew for you. It's about whether the money you have, whatever the amount, is actually doing the job you need it to do. That's a completely different conversation. And once you start having that conversation with yourself, the whole picture changes. So let's talk about that number, $500,000. It gets thrown around constantly. You hear it on podcasts, you see it in headlines, your brother-in-law mentions it at the holiday dinner like it's the universal passcode into a comfortable retirement. And if you don't have it, you start to feel something heavy in your chest, like you're behind, like you missed the boat, like everyone else figured something out that you didn't. But here's where the story takes a turn most people never hear. When you actually look at the real numbers, when you look past the headlines and into the actual data, what you discover is something almost nobody tells you in plain English. The number of people who have 500,000 or more saved by retirement age is much smaller than the conversations make it sound. And the people who don't have that number, they're not falling behind. They're the majority. They're the typical case. They're the rule, not the exception. Let me say that again because it matters. If you do not have $500,000 in your retirement accounts, you are not behind. You are normal. You are typical. You are the average American who worked a real job, raised real kids, paid real bills, and did the best you could with what life actually handed you. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because once you understand that, a second question pops up. If most people don't have that number, how are they actually doing? Are they all miserable? Are they all sitting at home eating ramen? Are they all panicking? And the answer, when you look honestly, is no. Many of them are doing just fine. Some are doing better than fine. They figured out something the headlines never explain. They figured out that retirement isn't about the size of the pile. It's about the steady stream. Let me give you the first truth that changes how you look at this whole topic. Most people walk into retirement looking at the wrong asset. They look at their savings, their investments, their accounts. They open up that statement and they stare at the number and they let it decide how they feel about their whole life. And listen, those numbers matter. I'm not saying they don't, but there's another asset hiding in plain sight. One that most people never properly value. It's the income that doesn't depend on the market. The money that shows up whether the stock market is up or down, whether the news is good or bad, whether the economy is humming or stumbling. Most people have more of this than they realize. They just don't know how to see it. Think about it this way. If you've worked for 30 or 40 years and paid into Social Security, you have an asset, a real one. It might not show up on your brokerage statement, but it's real. If you have a pension from an old employer, even a small one, that's an asset. If you have a spouse who's also bringing in income, that's part of the picture too. If you own your home and don't have a mortgage anymore, that's an enormous asset that doesn't show up in any retirement account. All of these things together form what I want you to start calling your income floor. And your income floor matters more than the number on your statement. Here's something to remember as we keep going. The goal isn't a big number. The goal is a steady life. Keep that with you as we continue. Now let's get into the second truth, because this is where the math gets interesting. Most people do their retirement calculations completely backwards. They start with how much they've saved, then try to figure out if it's enough. They take that number, they put it into some online calculator, they get a result, and then they either feel good or feel terrible. But the real calculation should start somewhere else entirely. It should start with your life. What does it actually cost to live the way you want to live? Then work backwards from there to see what supports it. Because when you do the math this way, something surprising happens. The target moves, and it's often closer than you think. Let me paint a picture that sounds familiar. You're someone who's been diligent. You've saved consistently. You've followed the advice, made the contributions, done the things you were supposed to do. And now you're looking at your number and something doesn't feel right. The number is respectable. Your friends would say you're doing well. But inside, there's a nagging feeling that something is missing. You're not sure if it's enough. You don't feel the peace you expected to feel. Sound familiar? This is where most careful savers end up. With a number that looks good on paper but doesn't feel secure in real life. And the reason it doesn't feel secure is because nobody ever taught you to translate that number into monthly income. Nobody taught you to look at it as a stream instead of a pile. Or maybe your situation is different. Maybe you've had a long career, maybe some bumps along the way, maybe not as much saved as you would like. Maybe a divorce knocked you back. Maybe you helped a kid through college. Maybe you took care of an aging parent. Maybe life just happened the way life happens. And now you're looking at a smaller number and thinking you're in trouble. But here's what you might have that nobody is counting for you. Years of Social Security contributions, maybe a pension from an old employer, maybe a spouse's income to consider, maybe a paid-off home, maybe a part-time skill you can still use. Your situation doesn't look like the success stories in the magazines. But when you look at the actual monthly income picture, it might look a lot stronger than you think. The difference between stress and peace isn't the size of your account. It's whether you understand what your income actually looks like. Now, let me give you an analogy that might help all of this make more sense. Imagine your retirement finances like a thermostat in your home. Some parts of your financial picture act like the thermostat. They keep the temperature steady, no matter what's happening outside. Social Security, pensions, fixed annuities, these are your thermostat features. They keep things stable. Other parts of your finances act like opening a window. They're exposed to what's happening outside. Your investment account, your stock holdings, when the market gets crazy, these feel it. Most people focus entirely on what happens when they open the window. They watch the market every day. They check their balance every week. They live and die by the ups and downs. But the real comfort in retirement comes from how well your thermostat is set. If your thermostat is strong enough to keep things stable on its own, then opening the window every once in a while doesn't change your comfort much. That's the whole game. Here's where the third truth comes in. And this is the shift that changes everything. Stop thinking about retirement as an end point. Start thinking about it as a transition into something different. Different rhythm, different income, different priorities, different days. It's not a wall you crash into, it's a road you turn onto. And once you see it as a transition, the planning becomes clearer, the decisions become simpler, and the fear that comes from uncertainty starts to fade. Because transitions you can plan for, walls you just crash into. I want you to hold on to this thought. Most people are not broke. They're just confused. There's a big difference. A person who is broke has no resources. A person who is confused has resources but doesn't know how to read them. The fix for confusion is not more money. The fix for confusion is information. And that's why this conversation matters. Because once you have the right information, the same exact numbers in your same exact accounts can suddenly look completely different. So let's look at what the real picture looks like for retirees in America today. When you look at the actual savings of people approaching retirement, the typical household has far less than $500,000 saved. A lot less. The median retirement savings for households nearing retirement is somewhere in the low six figures. And for many households, it's much lower than even that. The 500,000 mark, that puts you in a smaller group than the conversations would have you believe. So if you don't have it, please understand this. You are not the exception. You are not the failure. You are not behind. You are simply where most people are. And most people somehow find a way to make retirement work. That's not a coincidence. That's the income floor doing its job. Here's the thing about Social Security that I really want you to understand. For the average retiree, Social Security replaces about 40% of their pre-retirement income. For some people, it replaces more. For some, less. But the point is, it's a real number. And if you add a spouse's Social Security to that, you might be looking at 60 or 70% of your old income, just from those two checks alone. That's massive. That's a thermostat that's already doing a lot of work before your savings even gets called into action. Now think about the grocery list for a moment. Think about planning your retirement expenses, like making a grocery list. You could make a list based on what you think you should be eating. All the healthy stuff, the premium items, the aspirational groceries. Or you could make a list based on what you actually eat, what you actually throw away, what actually makes it onto the table. Most retirement planning uses the aspirational list. The retirement budget that assumes lots of travel, big restaurants, every weekend something fancy. But the real budget that most retirees actually live on, that's based on the actual list. Quieter weeks, simpler meals, a routine that you actually settle into. And when you use the real list, the number you need is often surprisingly different from the one everyone throws around. Before we move on, if you're feeling something shift in how you think about this, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. Stay with me, because the next part might be the most important part of this entire conversation. Now let's talk about market volatility, because this is where so many people in retirement lose sleep at night. Think of your retirement money like a river. When the river is moving forward, it's easy to think you don't need to pay attention to the current. But here's what happens. If you hit a rough patch early in retirement, if the market dips right when you start drawing down, that early damage can be hard to recover from. It's like the river. A strong current early on can push you far off course, even if things smooth out later. That's why the timing of your early withdrawals matters more than most people realize. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the sequence of your returns matters enormously. The same average return over 30 years can leave one retiree fine and another retiree in trouble, just based on when the good years and bad years happen to fall. This is part of what nobody tells you. During your working years, when the market drops, it almost doesn't matter because you're not pulling money out. You're putting money in. A drop is actually a buying opportunity. But once you flip from saving to spending, a drop hits differently. You're selling shares at lower prices to fund your life. That's why a person with $500,000 and a strong income floor often feels safer than a person with $800,000 and almost no income floor. The first person can ride out a bad market. The second person is forced to sell during the storm. Keep this in mind. Your retirement isn't someone else's retirement. That's why the general advice so often misses the mark. The person who needs $8,000 a month to feel okay has a totally different situation from the person who feels great on $4,000 a month. Same age, same country, totally different math. So when you see those general headlines about how much you need, just understand they're talking about an imaginary average person who doesn't actually exist. You exist, your situation exists, and your numbers are the ones that matter. Let me give you one more analogy, because I think this one really lands. Imagine you're standing outside and someone offers you 2 umbrellas. One umbrella is small but reliable. It covers you in light rain. It won't break. It works every time. The other umbrella is huge, flashy, covers a massive area, but it only works when the weather is perfect. In a storm, it flips inside out. In bright sun, it's awkward and gets in the way. Most people grab the big umbrella because it looks impressive. But the person who chose the small, reliable umbrella, they're the one who stays dry. Your guaranteed income sources, that's your reliable umbrella. Your investments, that's the flashy one that sometimes fails you when you need it most. Both have a place. But knowing which one is which changes how you walk through the rain. Now let's get into healthcare, because this is the part that scares people. And I get it. Healthcare costs in retirement are real, and they're not small. Medicare helps a lot, but it doesn't cover everything. There are premiums, there are deductibles, there are things Medicare doesn't touch at all, like most dental, most vision, and long-term care. So when you plan, you have to assume that healthcare will be a real line item every month. Not a scary, mysterious line item, just a real one. Most retirees end up spending several $100s a month on healthcare costs, even with Medicare, and that number tends to climb as you get older. But here's the thing. If you know it's coming, you can plan for it. The scary part of healthcare costs isn't the cost itself. It's the surprise. Take the surprise away, and it becomes just another item in your monthly picture. Housing is another piece people don't think clearly about. If you own your home and you've paid it off, you have removed one of the biggest expenses most working people deal with. That's huge. If you have a mortgage going into retirement, that monthly payment is going to take a real bite out of your income, and you need to plan for that honestly. Some people choose to downsize. Some people choose to stay where they are. Some people rent because it's simpler. There's no single right answer. But your housing decision is one of the biggest levers you have, and it changes your whole monthly picture. A person with a modest savings and no mortgage is often in a much better spot than a person with bigger savings and a big housing payment hanging over them. Here's why this matters. Once you see the full picture, the decisions become clearer and the fear gets smaller. The reason fear feels so big right now might be because the picture you're looking at is incomplete. You're looking at one number on a screen instead of all the moving parts that actually make up your life. Let's talk about inflation for a minute, because this is the quiet one. Inflation doesn't show up in dramatic news headlines the same way a market crash does. It just slowly, steadily makes everything cost more over time. And in a long retirement, that adds up. The dollar you spend at 65 doesn't buy what the dollar at 80 will need to buy. The good news is, Social Security has a cost of living adjustment built in. So that part of your income floor tends to keep pace, at least partially, with rising costs. The challenge is on the savings side. Your savings need to grow at least enough to keep up with inflation, or your buying power slowly shrinks even if the dollar amount stays the same. That's why even in retirement, you usually keep some money invested for growth. Not all of it, just enough to keep pace with the long, slow march of prices. Here's something to take with you. The answer might be simpler than you think. You just need the right framework. The framework is income floor, real spending, and a savings cushion that bridges the gap between them. That's it. 3 things, not 20, not a complicated spreadsheet. Just 3 things you can actually understand and actually look at. Now let me talk about the famous 4% rule for a second. You've probably heard of it. The idea is you can take out about 4% of your savings each year and have a good chance of your money lasting through retirement. And it's a useful starting point. Really it is. But here's what most people don't realize. The 4% rule is a starting point, not a finish line. It's based on certain assumptions about markets, about how long you'll live, about how you'll invest, Real life is messier. Some years you'll spend more, some less. Some years markets will help, some they'll hurt. So instead of treating 4% like a hard rule, treat it like a guideline, a reference point, something to check yourself against. The actual rate you use should flex based on what's happening in your life and in the world. Quick question. When's the last time you actually looked at your Social Security estimate in detail? Not the quick glance, the real look. If it's been a while, that's one of the most useful hours you could spend. Because the moment you really understand what's coming in from Social Security every month, the rest of your math gets a lot clearer. Let's talk about the difference between income planning and wealth planning, because this is a huge thing that almost nobody explains. Wealth planning is what most financial advice focuses on. How do I grow my money? How do I get a bigger account? How do I beat the market? Income planning is different. Income planning asks, how do I create a stream of money that I can actually live on month after month for the rest of my life? Those are different questions, and they have different answers. A person who has done great wealth planning might still be stressed in retirement if they never translated that wealth into reliable income. A person with less wealth but a clear income plan might feel completely at peace. It's not about optimism. It's about accuracy. The right plan for your life depends on which question you're really asking. Here's something that might surprise you. The number you need might be lower than you think, but you'll only believe that if you see why. The reason it might be lower is because your income floor is doing more work than you've ever given it credit for. The reason it might be lower is because your real spending is probably less than your aspirational spending. The reason it might be lower is because you've been comparing yourself to a target that wasn't designed for your specific life. When you put your real numbers in, instead of the headline numbers, the gap is often smaller than the fear suggested. You don't need to be wealthy to be secure. You need to be informed. So if most people don't have 500,000, what do they actually have? Many people approaching retirement have less than 200,000 in their accounts. Many have less than 100,000. Some have very little at all. And yet many of them go on to have decent retirements. Not luxurious, not first-class travel, but stable, steady, predictable. And honestly, that's what most people really want. Not yachts, not mansions, just a steady life where the bills get paid, the lights stay on, the freezer stays full, and there's a little left over for the grandkids, a meal out, a small trip. That kind of retirement is much more achievable than the headlines suggest. I want you to ask yourself something. Have you ever thought about what retirement would feel like if you actually trusted your numbers? Most people never get to that feeling because they never sit down and actually map out their income floor. That's the exercise that changes everything. The fear doesn't come from not having enough. It comes from not knowing what you have. Here's what I want you to do with all of this. Take this home with you tonight. First, write down every source of income you have coming in each month, no matter how small. Pension, Social Security, rental income, anything that shows up without you doing anything. That's your floor. Don't skip this step. Don't estimate it in your head. Write it down. Numbers on paper, real and visible. Second, look at the last 3 months of your actual spending. Not what you budget for, not what you wish you spent, what you actually spent. Pull the bank statements if you need to. Add it up. Divide by 3. That's your real number, the honest one. Third, subtract your floor from your real number. Whatever's left over, that's what needs to come from your savings every month. Now here's the key. Don't compare that to some massive target number you heard somewhere. Compare it to what you actually have. Take what you have, divide by 12, divide by 25 years, whatever rough math makes sense for your situation. And now you have something nobody gave you before, a clear picture of where you actually stand. Most people, when they do this exercise honestly, find one of two things. Either they realize their gap is smaller than they feared and their savings can probably handle it, or they realize the gap is bigger than they thought and they have specific, concrete things they can do about it. Either way, they finally know. And knowing, even if the news isn't great, beats wondering. Wondering is the worst place to live. When you understand your income, when you understand your expenses, when you understand what your savings is actually supposed to do, something changes. The uncertainty doesn't disappear, but it shrinks. You stop chasing abstract numbers and start focusing on concrete decisions. You stop comparing yourself to imaginary people in magazine articles and start looking at your own life with clear eyes. And that's the shift that matters. From confusion to clarity, from fear to confidence, from wondering if you're doing enough to knowing exactly where you stand. Because once you know where you stand, you can make decisions. And once you can make decisions, you can move forward. And that's what retirement planning is really about. Not perfection, not hitting some headline number, just progress made from a place of clarity instead of panic. So the next time you hear that 500,000 number tossed around like it's the law of the land, I want you to remember something. Most people don't have it. And most of those people are doing okay anyway, not because they got lucky, because they understood what they had, planned for what they spent, and built a life that fit inside their real situation. That's the secret nobody puts in a headline. That's the truth nobody tweets about. And now it's something you finally see clearly, in a way that maybe you didn't an hour ago. Peace of mind isn't a luxury. It's a legitimate retirement goal. And it's available to you, no matter what your account balance says today. If this gave you a clearer picture of your retirement, subscribe. The next one goes even further.